Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the bustling village of Rivermore. Merchants hawked their wares in the open-air market, and children laughed as they chased one another between the stalls. Alara Windrider pulled her cloak tighter around her slender frame, her keen elven eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble or opportunity. She had arrived in Rivermere seeking answers. Whispers of dark magic and unnatural occurrences had reached even the secluded forests where she usually roamed. More importantly, she had traced clues about her family's mysterious disappearance to this very place. The pendant around her neck, a simple silver leaf, glowed faintly, a sign that she was on the right path. As she navigated through the throng of villagers, a commotion near the center of the market caught her attention. A group had gathered around a stout dwarf who stood atop a wooden crate, his fiery red beard bristling as he recounted a tale of peril and heroism. And there I was, face to face with a troll as big as a mountain. The dwarf exclaimed, swinging an imaginary axe. The crowd oohed and awed, thoroughly entertained. Alara couldn't help but smirk. Dwarves were known for their embellishments. Still, something about this one piqued her interest. Perhaps it was the way his eyes didn't quite match his jovial demeanor. A hint of sorrow lurked beneath the surface. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the market, extinguishing torches and causing the villagers to shiver. The sky darkened unnaturally, and a hush fell over the crowd. Alara's senses went on high alert. This was no ordinary weather change. From the shadows emerged figures clad in tattered robes, their faces obscured. The air grew thick with a stench of decay. Undead, Alara whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the bow strapped to her back. Panic erupted as the creatures advanced, skeletal hands grasping and mouths emitting ghastly moans. The dwarf leapt off his crate, brandishing a hefty warhammer that seemed too large for his stout frame. To arms! He roared. Protect the village! Alara swiftly notched an arrow, releasing it into the nearest ghoul. The arrow struck true, and the creature crumbled into a heap of bones. From the corner of her eye, she noticed bolts of arcane energy zipping past, striking the undead with precision. Turning, she saw a young man in ornate robes, his eyes glowing with magical intensity. The battle was fierce but brief. Together, Alara, the dwarf, and the mage repelled the undead assault, saving countless villagers in the process. As the last of the creatures fell, the unnatural darkness lifted, and the village began to stir from its terror-induced stupor. Breathing heavily, the dwarf approached Alara and the mage. "Well fought, friends." "The name's through an iron fist," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Alara Windrider," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Lysander Blackwood," the mage added, offering a slight bow. "I must say, your archery skills are exceptional." Before they could exchange more pleasantries, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes and a shawl wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders approached them. "You must come with me," she said urgently. "There's much to discuss, and little time." They followed the woman to a modest cottage on the outskirts of the village. Inside, candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with strange symbols and ancient artifacts. "I am Madame Serafini," the woman began, settling into a high-backed chair. "Seer of these lands, the attack you witnessed is but a harbinger of darker times." Thrin crossed his arms skeptically. "And what makes you so sure, old woman?" Serafini's eyes flashed. "Because I have seen Ida in the stars, in the cards, and now with my own eyes." The throne of the undead stirs once more. A heavy silence filled the room. Alara felt a chill run down her spine. "That's just a legend," she said softly. "Legends often hold a kernel of truth," Lysander interjected. "The throne was said to control legions of the undead, granting its master unparalleled power." Serafini nodded. "A dark sorcerer named Cain has found the key to unlock the throne's seal. If he succeeds, the world as we know it will fall into eternal darkness." Thrin slammed his fist onto the table. "Then we must stop him." "Indeed, Serafini agreed. But you cannot do it alone. There are artifacts ancient and powerful that can counter his magic. The Blade of Light, hidden deep within the Whispering Caves, is one such artifact. Allure exchanged glances with Lysander and Thrin. It seems our paths are intertwined, she said. I propose we join forces. Lysander hesitated. I must admit, I have my own reasons for opposing Cain. But I agree we stand a better chance together. Thrin grinned. A mage, an elf, and a dwarf walk into a cave. Sounds like the start of a grand adventure. The next morning, they set out toward the Whispering Caves. The journey was arduous, the terrain shifting from lush forests to rocky outcrops as they neared their destination. Along the way, they shared stories. Thrin spoke of a failed mission that cost him his honor. Lysander revealed he had been expelled from the Arcane Academy for delving into forbidden studies, and Allure confessed her search for her missing family. As dusk approached, they arrived at the mouth of the Whispering Caves. A haunting melody emanated from within, as if the wind itself carried voices from another realm. Stay close, Allure cautioned, drawing her bow. These caves are said to test one's very soul. They ventured inside, the light from Lysander's staff casting elongated shadows on the damp walls. The whispers grew louder, morphing into recognizable words that seemed to target each of them individually. Failure, a voice hissed to Thrin. You let them die. He gritted his teeth, gripping his warhammer tighter. Ignore it, he muttered. Forbidden one, a sultry tone whispered to Lysander. Embrace the darkness. Lysander's eyes flickered uneasily. It's just illusions. Lost child, a gentle voice called to Allure. Join us. She shook her head, trying to focus. We need to keep moving. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way, and they tumbled into a cavernous chamber. Standing, they found themselves surrounded by spectral guardians, their translucent forms shimmering with ethereal light. Who dares enter our sacred domain? One of the spirits demanded. Allure stepped forward. We seek the Blade of Light to combat a great evil threatening our world. The spirits conferred among themselves before responding. To prove your worth, you must each face your greatest fear. Before they could react, the chamber shifted. Allure found herself alone in a dense forest, the canopy so thick that no light penetrated. Shadows moved around her, and familiar voices called out. Mother, father? She cried, running toward the sounds. But no matter how fast she ran, the voices remained just out of reach. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, where are you? A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a twisted version of herself, eyes glowing red. You will never find them, the apparition sneered. Because you are afraid to face the truth. Allure took a deep breath, steadying herself. You're not real, she declared. And I will not be swayed by fear. The illusion shattered, and she was back in the chamber. Thrin and Lysander appeared beside her, both looking shaken but resolute. The spirits nodded approvingly. You have proven yourselves worthy. A pedestal emerged from the ground, and atop it rested the Blade of Light, a sort of exquisite craftsmanship, its blade pulsating with a radiant glow. Thrin reached out to grasp the hilt, but the moment he did, the cavern began to quake. We need to get out of here, Lysander shouted. They raced back the way they came, the path collapsing behind them. Just as they leapt out of the cave entrance, the entire structure crumbled, sealing the Whispering Caves forever. Catching their breath, they examined their prize. With this blade, we stand a chance against Cain, Allure said, hope tinging her voice. As they made camp for the night, a rustling in the bushes put them on alert. A figure stumbled into the firelight, a lithe woman with jet black hair and mischievous eyes. Easy there, she said, holding up your hands. Name's Nyx. I mean you no harm. Thrin raised an eyebrow. And what brings you to our humble campsite in the middle of nowhere? Nyx smirked. Let's just say I have a score to settle with a certain dark sorcerer. Word travels fast, and I heard you might be in the business of thwarting his plans. Allure studied her carefully. Something about Nyx didn't sit right, but they could use all the help they could get. Very well, she said cautiously, you can join USA for now. Over the next few days, Nyx proved herself resourceful and skilled, helping them navigate treacherous terrain and even saving them from an ambush of Kane's minions. Yet, Allure couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Nyx than met the eye. One evening, as the group rested near the Forsaken Forest, Nyx approached Allure, who was on watch. "Can't sleep?" Nyx asked, her tone casual. "Someone has to keep an eye out," Allure replied coolly. Nyx leaned against a tree, twirling a dagger between her fingers. "You don't trust me?" Allure met her gaze. "Trust is earned." Nyx sighed. "Fair enough. But note these, I have as much at stake in stopping Kane as you do." Before Allure could respond, a haunting melody drifted through the air, the same they had heard in the Whispering Caves. The Forsaken Forest was living up to its name. "Wake up!" Allure shouted, rousing the others. "Something's coming." The trees around them seemed to come alive, branches twisting and reaching like gnarled fingers. Shadows flitted between the trunks, and airy laughter echoed. Lysander began to chant, creating a protective barrier around them. "The forest is enchanted to prey on our fears," he warned. "Visions materialized, loved ones lost, failures relived, deepest insecurities laid bare." Thryn saw his fallen comrades accusing him of betrayal. Lysander faced a council of mages condemning him for his forbidden knowledge. Nyx was confronted by a spectral figure calling her a traitor. Allure closed her eyes, centering herself. "Remember why we're here," she called out. "These are just illusions." Summoning her inner strength, she fired an arrow imbued with light into the canopy. The resulting burst dispelled the shadows, and the forest fell silent once more. Breathing heavily, the group gathered their wits. "That was too close," Thryn muttered. As dawn broke, they emerged from the Forsaken Forest, weary but undeterred. Ahead lay the ancient city of Eldoria, its towering spires piercing the sky like silent sentinels. "We're getting closer," Lysander noted, but so was Kane. They made their way into the city, which was eerily deserted. The once majestic buildings were now ruins, overtaken by nature and time. In the center stood the entrance to the dungeon where the throne of the undead was sealed. Nyx consulted a parchment filled with arcane symbols. According to this, Kane plans to perform the resurrection ritual during the lunar eclipse tonight. "Then we have no time to lose," Thryn declared. As they approached the dungeon entrance, a horde of undead warriors emerged, blocking their path. Leading them was a towering figure clad in dark armor, eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "Kane's elite guard," Lysander said grimly. Allure drew the blade of light. "We make our stand here." The battle that ensued was unlike any they had faced before. The undead fought with relentless fury, immune to pain and fear. Thryn's warhammer crushed bones with each swing, while Lysander's spells sent arcs of lightning coursing through the enemy ranks. Nyx moved like a shadow, her daggers finding gaps in the armor of their foes. Amidst the chaos, Allure felt a surge of power emanating from the blade of light. It guided her movements, and with each strike, the undead fell. Just when they thought they were gaining the upper hand, a chilling laugh echoed through the battlefield. Kane appeared atop a crumbling archway, his dark robes billowing as if caught in an unseen storm. "You are too late," he sneered. "The throne shall be mine, and with it, the world will kneel." Lysander stepped forward. "We won't let that happen." Kane's eyes flickered over the group, lingering on Lysander. "Ah, the prodigal mage. Join me, and together we can unlock secrets beyond your wildest dreams." Lysander hesitated for a fraction of a second, temptation flashing across his face. Allure placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't listen to him." Snapping out of it, Lysander nodded. "Your promises are empty, Kane." Kane's expression darkened. "So be it." He raised his hands, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. From the earth erupted shadowy tendrils that lashed out violently. The team scattered to avoid them. In the midst of the turmoil, Nyx slipped away unnoticed, her eyes fixed on the entrance to the dungeon. "She's heading for the throne," Allure shouted. Thryn grunted as he blocked a tendril with his hammer. "Go. We'll hold off Kane's forces." Allure and Lysander sprinted after Nyx, leaving Thryn and the remaining villagers who had joined the fight to contend with the dark sorcerer. Inside the dungeon, the air was thick with arcane energy. They found Nyx standing before the sealed door of the throne's chamber, the artifacts they had collected laid out before her. Nyx turned to face them, a conflicted look in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I had no choice." Allur's eyes narrowed. "You were working with Cain all along." "Not by choice," Nyx replied. "He holds something over me, someone I care about." Lysander stepped forward cautiously. "We can help you. Just stop this." Tears welled in Nyx's eyes. "It's too late." A rumbling sound echoed as the seal began to crack. Cain appeared behind them, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "Excellent work, Nyx." Realizing they were outmatched, Allure gripped the blade of light tightly. "We have to stop the ritual." As the door to the chamber slowly opened, a surge of dark energy burst forth, knocking them all back. The throne of the undead stood before them, a grotesque creation of bone and shadow, pulsating with malevolent power. Cain approached it reverently. At last. But before he could claim his prize, Thryn barreled into the chamber, bloodied but unbroken. "Not so fast!" he roared, charging at Cain. Cain snarled, casting a bolt of dark magic that struck Thryn squarely in the chest. The dwarf staggered but remained standing. "For honor," he whispered, throwing his hammer with all his might. The hammer struck the throne, causing a fissure to appear. The chamber shook violently. "Now!" Allure shouted to Lysander. Together, they combined their powers, Allure channeling the blade's energy and Lysander weaving a complex spell. A beam of pure light engulfed the throne, amplifying the fissure. Cain screamed in fury. "You fools!" In a blinding flash, the throne shattered, sending shock waves that knocked everyone off their feet. When the dust settled, the throne was no more. Cain lay on the ground, weakened but alive. Nyx rushed to his side, but instead of helping him, she retrieved a pendant from around his neck. "It's over," she said softly. Cain looked up at her with a mix of rage and despair. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning. The Shadow Council will not be pleased." Before they could question him further, he dissolved into a shadowy mist and vanished. Exhausted, the group gathered themselves. Thryn was gravely injured, his breaths shallow. "Did we do it?" he asked weakly. Allure knelt beside him. "Yes, thanks to you." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Good. That's good." His eyes closed, and he breathed his last. Tears streamed down Allure's face. Lysander placed a hand on her shoulder. "He died a hero." Nyx stood apart, clutching the pendant. "I didn't want any of this." Allure stood, her expression hardening. "You betrayed us." "I had no choice," Nyx pleaded. "But I can help you now." "There's more at play than you realize." Lysander looked at her skeptically. "Why should we trust you?" "Because Cain was just a pawn," Nyx revealed. "The Shadow Council he mentioned it, they're the true threat. They orchestrated everything." Allure exchanged a glance with Lysander. "Then we have work to do." As they emerged from the dungeon, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The village of Rivermere lay in the distance, unaware of the sacrifices made to ensure their safety. "Thryn's sacrifice won't be in vain," Allure vowed. Lysander nodded. "We owe it to Hema and to the world to continue the fight." Nyx stepped forward hesitantly. "Let me help. I know their secrets." Allure regarded her for a long moment before extending her hand. "One chance. Betray us again, and there won't be a third." Nyx accepted the hand gratefully. "Understood." Together, they set off toward the uncertain path ahead, united by a common purpose and the lingering shadows of the challenges yet to come. As the trio ventured away from the ruins of Eldoria, the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them. The landscape stretched out before them, a patchwork of rolling hills, dense forests, and distant mountains shrouded in mist. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of impending winter. Allure walked ahead, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The loss of Thryn gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made and those yet to come. Lysander followed closely, his staff doubling as a walking stick. He occasionally glanced at Nyx, who trailed a few steps behind, her gaze distant. After several hours of silent trekking, they reached a crossroads marked by an ancient stone carved with cryptic symbols. Allure paused, studying the markings. "This is an old Elvish script," she murmured. "It speaks of a sanctuary to the east, a place of healing and knowledge." Lysander nodded thoughtfully. "The Sanctum of Illyria. I've read about it. The scholars there possess archives that span millennia. Perhaps we can find information about the Shadow Council." Nyx shifted uncomfortably. "The Sanctum isn't exactly welcoming to outsiders, especially ones with complicated pasts." Allure turned to face her. "We don't have much of a choice. If we're to stand against the Shadow Council, we need all the information we can gather." Nyx met her gaze but said nothing, her expression unreadable. They decided to make camp for the night before heading east. As darkness fell, they gathered around a modest fire. The flames cast flickering shadows, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures echoed in the distance. Lysander broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what came about the Shadow Council. They're not mentioned in any official records, but there are whispers in forbidden texts." Allure looked intrigued. "What do you know?" He hesitated. "They're a clandestine group of powerful beings who manipulate events from behind the scenes. Kings, wars, catastrophes, all orchestrated to serve their mysterious agenda." Nyx poked at the fire with a stick. "They're more than just puppet masters. They seek to unmake the world and rebuild it in their image." Allure raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know this?" Nyx sighed. "Because I was once recruited by them. Or at least, they tried. When I refused, they took someone dear to me. I've been trying to undermine them ever since." Lysander studied her carefully. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" "Would you have believed me?" Nyx countered. "Trust is a rare commodity among us." Allure considered her words. "Perhaps it's time we start trusting each other, fully. If we're to face an enemy of this magnitude, we can't afford to hold back." Nyx glanced up, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Agreed." The next morning, they set off toward the Sanctum of Illyria. The journey was relatively uneventful until they reached the outskirts of the Mistwood, a forest perpetually cloaked in a thick fog that distorted sound and sight. As they entered the Mistwood, the atmosphere grew oppressive. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes. The fog swirled around them, and strange whispers seemed to emanate from the shadows. "Stay close," Allure cautioned. "It's easy to get lost here." They moved cautiously, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves putting them on edge. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, a tall man draped in robes of deep green, his face obscured by a hood. "Travelers, what brings you to the Mistwood?" he asked in a voice that was both welcoming and unsettling. "We're on our way to the Sanctum of Illyria," Lysander replied. "And you are?" The man lifted his head slightly, revealing eyes that shimmered like molten silver. "I am Selwyn, guardian of these woods. Few pass through here unscathed." Allure felt a twinge of unease. "We're merely passing through. We mean no harm." Selwyn smiled faintly. "Harm is not always in intent but in consequence." "Tell me, do you carry with you items of great power?" Nyx's hand moved subtly toward her dagger. "Why do you ask?" "Because such items can disrupt the balance of this place," Selwyn explained. "They attract unwanted attention." Before they could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. From the mist emerged shadowy creatures with elongated limbs and faces devoid of features. Their movements were erratic, almost glitch-like. "Void wraiths!" Lysander exclaimed. "They're attracted to magical artifacts." Selwyn stepped back. "You have brought danger into my domain. You must leave at once." The wraiths closed in, their whispers invading the group's minds, dredging up painful memories and fears. Allure gripped the blade of light. "We need to fight them off." Lysander began casting a protective spell, but the wraiths disrupted his focus. Nyx threw daggers that passed through the creatures harmlessly. "Our physical attacks won't work," she shouted. Allure recalled Thrin's bravery and felt a surge of determination. She raised the blade, its light piercing through the fog. The wraiths recoiled but did not retreat. "Keep it up," Lysander encouraged. "They're vulnerable to pure light." Channeling her energy, Alara intensified the blade's glow. The wraiths shrieked soundlessly before dissipating into the mist. Breathing heavily, she lowered the sword. Selwyn observed them with a mixture of awe and wariness. "Perhaps I was too hasty in my judgment," he admitted. "You wield great power responsibly." Nyx eyed him skeptically. "Now that we've saved your forest, maybe you can help us." He considered her request. "Very well, I can guide you safely to the edge of the mistwood. From there, the sanctum is but half a day's journey." True to his word, Selwyn led them through hidden paths, the oppressive atmosphere gradually lifting until they emerged into a sunlit meadow. "This is where I leave you," he said. "May your quest find success." They thanked him and continued toward the sanctum. As evening approached, the towering spires of Illyrio came into view, their surfaces gleaming with a pearlescent sheen. At the entrance, they were met by a pair of elven guards clad in silver armor. "State your purpose," one commanded. Alar stepped forward. "We seek audience with the Keepers of Knowledge. We have urgent need of their counsel." The guards exchanged glances before one replied, "Few are granted access, but your lineage grants you consideration. Wait here." After a tense wait, they were escorted inside. The sanctum's interior was breathtaking. The walls lined with ancient tomes, floating orbs of light illuminating vast halls, and scholars immersed in study. They were led to a chamber where an elderly elf with eyes as deep as the ocean awaited them. "I am Eldrin, head keeper. What brings you to our sacred halls?" Alara recounted their encounters with Cain, the destruction of the throne of the undead, and the looming threat of the Shadow Council. Eldrin listened intently. "The Shadow Council is a perilous adversary. Their origins are shrouded even to us, but legends speak of them as remnants of an ancient order that predates even the oldest civilizations." Lysander leaned forward. "How can we fight them?" "They draw power from the very fabric of existence, manipulating realities to their whim," Eldrin explained. "Conventional means will not suffice. However, there may be a way." Nyx looked skeptical. "And what might that be?" Eldrin gestured to a large, ornate door behind him. "Beyond this door lies the Veil of Echo as a gateway to the ethereal plane. If you can enter it, you may find the Elysian Shard, an artifact capable of countering the Council's influence." Alar felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. "What are the risks?" "Many who enter the Veil do not return," Eldrin warned. "The ethereal plane is not bound by our laws. Time, space, even your very identities can become fragmented." Nyx crossed her arms. "Sounds like a walk in the park." Despite the risks, they agreed to proceed. Eldrin performed a ritual to open the veil, the door shimmering as if made of liquid silver. "Remember," he cautioned, "hold on to your sense of self. It's your anchor." Steeling themselves, they stepped through the gateway. Instantly, the world around them dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. Gravity lost meaning, and they found themselves floating in a vast expanse of nothingness and everything all at once. Disembodied voices echoed around them, fragments of sentences and thoughts overlapping. Images from their past flashed by, some comforting, others haunting. Alara reached out, feeling as though she were moving through water. "Stay close," she called, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Lysander appeared beside her, his form flickering like a candle flame. "We need to focus on finding the shard." Nyx materialized nearby, clutching the pendant she had taken from Cain. "This might help," she suggested. The pendant began to glow, pulling them toward a distant point where the swirling chaos seemed to coalesce. As they moved closer, a structure emerged, a crystalline fortress floating amidst the void. At its center rested the Elysian Shard, emitting a soothing luminescence. But as they approached, a figure manifested before them, a woman of indescribable beauty with eyes that mirrored the universe itself. "I am Seraphina, guardian of the Shard," she announced. "Why do you seek this artifact?" Allure spoke earnestly. "To protect our world from the Shadow Council. They threaten to destroy all that we hold dear." Serafina studied them. "The shard is not a weapon but a mirror. It reflects the true nature of those who wield it. Are you prepared to face yourselves?" Lysander nodded. "We are." "Very well." With a wave of her hand, the shard floated toward them, its surface rippling. One by one, they gazed into it. Allure saw herself standing amidst a forest, but it was burning. She realized the flames represented her guilt over failing to find her family. Tears streamed down her face as she confronted her sense of helplessness. Lysander witnessed himself back at the Arcane Academy, his peers shunning him. But instead of feeling resentment, he acknowledged his reckless pursuit of forbidden knowledge and the harm it caused. Nyx faced a younger version of herself, innocent and hopeful, before betrayal hardened her heart. She understood that she had been running from her pain rather than confronting it. As they accepted these truths, the shard glowed brighter. Serafina smiled gently. "You have passed the test. The shard is yours." With the artifact secured, they needed to find a way back. The ethereal plane began to destabilize around them, the colors darkening and forms dissolving. "This way!" Lysander shouted, pointing toward a faint light that resembled the gateway they had entered. They raced toward it as the realm crumbled. Just as the void threatened to swallow them, they leapt through the portal, landing unceremoniously back in the sanctum. Eldrin looked relieved. "You made it." Allure held up the Elysian shard. "We have what we need." But their respite was short-lived. A thunderous crash shook the sanctum, and screams echoed from the halls. Rushing outside, they witnessed dark figures descending from the sky, cloaked in shadows and agents of the Shadow Council. At their forefront was a man with eyes like obsidian and a voice that resonated with power. "Hand over the shard," he demanded. "And we may spare what's left of this place." Eldrin stepped forward. "You defile sacred ground. Begone." The man sneered. "Very well, let chaos reign." A fierce battle erupted. The scholars and guardians of the sanctum fought valiantly but were overwhelmed by the council's dark magic. Alara, Lysander, and Nyx knew they had to act fast. "We need to activate the shard," Lysander urged. "But we don't know how," Nyx protested. Alara closed her eyes, recalling Serafina's words. "It reflects our true nature. We have to unify our intentions." They formed a circle, each placing a hand on the shard. Concentrating, they channeled their collective will to protect and heal. A radiant light burst forth, enveloping the sanctum and repelling the dark forces. The agents recoiled, their forms disintegrating in the brilliance. The leader of the attackers snarled, "This isn't over." With a swirl of his cloak, he vanished. The immediate threat neutralized, but the sanctum lay in ruins. Survivors tended to the wounded, and a somber mood settled over the once hallowed halls. Eldrin approached them, his eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "You have saved us, but at great cost." Alara bowed her head. "We did what we had to." Nyx looked around at the devastation. "This was just a fraction of their power. They'll come after us with everything they have." Lysander nodded. "Then we need to strike first. Use the shard to locate their stronghold." Eldrin hesitated. "Using the shard in such a manner is unprecedented." "The risks are worth it," Alara interjected. "If we don't stop them now, no place will be safe." Reluctantly, Eldrin agreed. "Very well. But you must proceed with caution." They prepared a ritual to harness the shard's power for locating the Shadow Council. As they began, the shard projected images of flashes of distant lands, towering fortresses, and finally settling on a bleak, desolate realm cloaked in eternal night. "That's the umbral nexus," Lysander identified. "A place where the boundaries between worlds are thinnest." Nyx clenched her fists. "That's where they hold their prisoners, including the one they took from me." Alara placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get them back." Armed with newfound determination, they set out for the umbral nexus. The journey took them through perilous terrains and treacherous mountains where the air was thin and every step could be their last, and across barren wastelands where nothing lived but the wind. As they approached the nexus, The environment grew increasingly unnatural. The sky was a swirling vortex of dark clouds, and the ground was littered with fragments of shattered realities. Standing before the entrancia, a massive gate forged from shadows as they steeled themselves for the final confrontation. "Once we go in, there's no turning back," Lysander warned. Allure drew the blade of light. "Then let's finish this." They pushed open the gate and entered a grand hall illuminated by floating orbs of dark energy. Seated on thrones carved from obsidian were the members of the Shadow Council, their faces concealed by ornate masks. The leader stood, his voice echoing, "Welcome, interlopers. You've come far, but this is where your journey ends." Nyx stepped forward defiantly. "We're here to put an end to your machinations and to free those you have taken." He laughed coldly. "You overestimate your capabilities." Allure raised the shard, its light cutting through the oppressive darkness. "We have something you fear." The council members recoiled slightly but quickly regained their composure. "You think a mere artifact can challenge us?" Lysander began to chant, weaving a complex spell that intertwined with the shard's energy. The room trembled as the opposing forces clashed. A fierce battle ensued. The council wielded dark magic that warped reality, but the trio fought back with a unity and strength forged through their trials. Nyx confronted the leader, engaging in a deadly dance of blades and shadows. "This is for all the lives you've ruined," she spat. He sneered. "You're nothing but a pawn, easily discarded." As they fought, Allure and Lysander focused on amplifying the shard's power. "We need to break their connection to this realm," Lysander shouted. "Leave that to me," Allure replied. She closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself to tap into the ancient magic of her lineage. The blade of light resonated with the shard, creating a harmonious frequency that began to unravel the fabric of the nexus. The council members realized too late what was happening. "Stop them," the leader commanded. But it was futile. The combined power of the shard and the blade created a vortex that began sucking in the dark energies. The council members were pulled toward it, their forms distorting. "This isn't the end," the leader bellowed as he was consumed. In a blinding flash, the nexus imploded. When the light faded, Allure, Lysander, and Nyx found themselves standing in a tranquil meadow bathed in sunlight. "Did we do it?" Nyx asked cautiously. Lysander looked around, sensing the air. "I think so." "The oppressive energy is gone." Allure smiled faintly. "We did it." A soft groan caught their attention. Turning, they saw people appearing throughout the meadow at those who had been taken by the Shadow Council, including a young man who rushed into Nyx's arms. "Caleb!" she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. He held her tightly. "I knew you'd come for me." Allure and Lysander watched the reunions unfolding around them, a sense of peace settling over them. "We couldn't have done it without each other," Lysander remarked. Allure nodded. "Agreed. Perhaps now, we can finally find some semblance of normalcy." Nyx approached them, Caleb by her side. "Thank you for everything. I owe you both more than I can ever repay." Allure shook her head. "You don't owe us anything. We're just glad you're reunited." Lysander stretched, a rare smile gracing his features. "So, what's next?" Allure gazed toward the horizon. "I think I might continue searching for my family. Somewhere out there are answers I still need." Nyx touched her arm gently. "If you ever need help, you know where to find me." Lysander adjusted his staff. "I might return to the Arcane Academy. Perhaps they'll reconsider my expulsion after hearing about our little adventure." They shared a light-hearted laugh. As they parted ways, each felt a sense of fulfillment and hope for the future. The shadows that once loomed so heavily over their world had been lifted, replaced by the promise of new beginnings. The sun shone brightly overhead, and for the first time in a long while, the path ahead seemed clear.